Welcome back to BYU Sports Nation. This is your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. I am Spencer Linton alongside Jerem Jordan. It is now time to welcome in for his weekly segment, the fabulous Trevor Matich of ESPN, college football insider, expert, and national champion for another Matich Monday. Trevor, a little bit different feeling this time around. This is the first non-winning Monday for BYU since late November of last year. It's been a wild ride. So as you assess what happened to BYU over the weekend, how are you feeling about the Cougars at this stage?
Well, I still feel good about them. All their goals are still in front of them. It's just that they've lost their mulligan. By losing this game, now they have to win out. They have to win the conference championship in order to make the playoffs. But it's still all there. They still control their destiny to that. And when you look at this game against Kansas, it was lost by execution. It was just pure execution. And had they executed better on simple things, I think they would have won the game. So I can't say that they're overrated. They had some sort of problem. They didn't execute in key moments when they have executed in key moments in close games leading up to this point. All of those things are within their grasp to handle. And so this is still a positive moment in time in this BYU season.
Certainly the defense played well enough to win, 17 points allowed and 242 total offense. They shut down that Kansas rushing game to the tune of 73 yards, 2.2 yards per carry. Those are all winning numbers. Unfortunately, the offense mustered 13 points, Trevor, and they have 3 touchdowns in the last 25 drives. Where do you start the conversation with trying to get this BYU offense back to what it was a couple weeks ago?
You start it with taking the plays that are there and making them. I mean, let's go all the way back to the interception at the end of the first half. That they had a 1st and goal at the 5, BYU did. And they had about 40 seconds to go. They had 2 timeouts. They came away with no points because on 1st down, that interception was a throw to the right side of the end zone. And if that was supposed to be a fade, then you need to be conservative in that you need to know where to miss. If you're going to miss on 1st down and you still have downs to go, then you need to miss a fade up and over the top so that it goes over the defender, over the receiver, and instead of landing on the boundary where the receiver can reach out and grab it and toe tap in for a touchdown, you have it land a couple of yards outside the boundary if you're going to miss. That ball was thrown inside and low. If it was supposed to be a back shoulder throw, then you need to miss by throwing it too far to the outside so that even the receiver can't reach back and get it, but the defender can't get it either. Instead, whichever it was, a fade or back shoulder, the ball was thrown in the wrong spot. It missed in the wrong place. If it were 4th down, well, you put it where the receiver has a chance. But on 1st down, you need to miss in the right place. So that's one of those things that they could have done better. Had that interception not occurred, even if they did not score a touchdown there, if you assume a field goal, then at the end of the game, they're kicking a field goal to win the game instead of having to go for it down 4 on 4th and 11.
Trevor, as you look at the BYU offense, really over the last 26 drives, we've talked about this earlier in the show, but only 3 touchdowns in those last 26 drives. Which fundamental differences need to be altered for BYU's offense on top of what you just talked about specifically from the Kansas game?
Well, I think the big picture is 3rd down conversions. BYU right now is 121st in the nation in 3rd down percentage. And they're really good on 4th down percentage. But when you have 3rd down failures, you got to punt. It stops drives. I mean, you look at the last drive at the end of the first half. It was the first drive at the beginning of the second half. It was a 17-play drive. They drove it down into field goal range, and then they ran the ball 3 times and ended up kicking a field goal. They ran it on 3rd and 6 down in the red zone, ended up kicking a field goal. It was a failure on 3rd down. 3rd and 6 in the red zone is a difficult ask. That's not necessarily 3rd manageable. That's kind of 3rd and long, right on the border. And so the failures to run successfully on 1st and 2nd down were why they ended up with 3rd and 6. And so those 3rd down conversions are what are stopping drives for BYU. They've overcome it in the past because the passing offense has been such a big play offense. Jake Retzloff coming into the game was only averaging 58% in his completion percentage. But that was in part because he throws the ball deep down the field a lot. And so that's perfectly fine. These quarterbacks that are completing 73% of their passes are throwing mostly short passes at or near the line of scrimmage. Jake is throwing the ball deep down the field. And those chunk plays erase some of the problems that not being able to convert third downs very well have caused for this team. Well, when the chunk plays weren't there, then those third downs needed to be converted. And BYU was able to drive the field, but when they got into the red zone, those third downs were not being converted.
Yeah, 3rd and 6.7 was tough, and only 2 plays of 20-plus against Kansas. Certainly explosive plays would help. After the game, a lot of guys talked to the media and to Spencer about, hey, this is a good thing. This is a wake-up call. We got to be ready, right, for Arizona State. Do you buy into the idea that, hey, it is a wake-up call and BYU will be ready, maybe more than they would have been for the Sun Devils?
I don't buy into the wake-up call thing. I think that's good PR. I think the players are saying the right things because they are saying that, hey, we are doubling down on everything that we're doing. And that's a good thing. But I didn't see signs from this team that they believed the hype. I saw the signs from this team that they were working hard and preparing hard and everything was being done the right way. I think everything was done the right way coming into this game. At least that's the way it looked. But then there were some things that failed on specific moments of execution. You know, one of those moments was on the goofy quick kick that Jalen Daniels did. You know, he lines up on 4th and 14th. He punts the ball. It hits a BYU player who's in man coverage in the helmet, bounces off, and another BYU player had a chance just to gather it in and recover it. He was right there. There were no Jayhawks around. But instead of being able to field that ball, it somehow bounced off him as he dove on it, and it went off into the distance. And Kansas State got it at the 3-yard line and then scored a touchdown from there. Well, that was a moment of execution. It wasn't a moment of, gee, we believe our hype, right? Now, I'm not pointing the finger at any particular players and blaming the loss on them. But what I'm saying is that the concept of being a wake-up call, I don't think they need a wake-up call. They just need to execute certain individual plays better.
Trevor Matich of ESPN is with us on BYU Sports Nation. Chase Roberts, BYU star receiver, and Tyler Batty, who's one of the stars on defense, and Jake Retzloff, as Jerem was mentioning, all spoke with me after the game, and they all pointed to, we didn't have a good week of practice. Like, that was almost the first thing that all three of them said out of their mouths. And it's understandable coming off of the euphoric high of beating Utah and just an emotional hangover. So, Trevor, how does BYU learn from something like that so they don't have this carryover and don't have a bad week of practice if they do encounter another big emotional win like that?
Well, even with what they say is a bad week of practice, I'm sure it felt bad to them. But when you look at how they played the game, it didn't look like they had a bad week of practice. And so, you know, the emotional carryover, there's a cliche in sports is don't let the last team that beat you twice, because you're so down the next week that you don't really get up and peak at the right time for the next game. And I get that. But again, look at how the defense played. This Kansas game played out the opposite of how I expected it to. Kansas, their offense has been peaking. They've been on fire recently. I mean, they put 532 total yards and 45 points on Iowa State the week before they played BYU. And that's one of the best defenses, Iowa State, in the Big 12. And when they didn't turn it over, when Kansas didn't make mistakes, they were virtually unstoppable. Devin Neal, Kansas' running back in that Iowa State game, set the all-time rushing record for Kansas. And he came in hot as well. He only had, 52 yards rushing against BYU. And I thought that Kansas would be able to move the ball and score. I thought that BYU would move the ball and score against a Kansas defense that was especially vulnerable against the pass. And it didn't turn out to be that kind of game. So BYU was fighting in there. They did a really outstanding job on defense. And like we talked about, just a couple of plays of execution on offense. So, you know, I think the players, if they felt like they didn't have a good week of practice, I mean, they were there. They were in that week of practice, but they still came out and played well enough to win this game, but for one or two plays. So, you know, focusing in practice when things go badly, which hadn't happened for BYU this year up until this Kansas game, is something they can learn from, is something they can do better. But I don't want to put it all on, their dobber was down because they were too happy about the Utah win, and therefore they didn't have a good enough week of practice to win the game against Kansas. They clearly were in position to win the game against Kansas. Could they have had a better week of practice? Sure. But that's something that they can get better at, and they better, because Arizona State's really good.
Let's talk about Arizona State. Sam Leavitt, a guy whose brother played at BYU here, I believe dad played at BYU. Very athletic, doesn't turn it over. Cam Scadaboo feels like the juggernaut. He is fun to watch. How does BYU win this game in a must-win, it feels like, to make the Big 12 title game?
Well, they've got to start with Cam Scadaboo. He's only 215 pounds, but he runs like he's 260. I mean, he's just a bulldozer. He's a bludgeon. And he came off a shoulder injury in that last game against Kansas State. And Kansas State limited him. I don't know if it was the defense just selling out to limit Scadaboo or if it was lingering effects of that injury. But Sam Leavitt at quarterback for the Sun Devils was able to make up for that. He had a magnificent game as a passer. So BYU is going to have to do what they did with Kansas. They'll have to stop the run first, and then they'll have to stop a quarterback who is capable, when he's hot, of making plays on defense. And then offensively, they're going up against a defense that is very sound. It's very solid. It's very disruptive. And so they'll need to execute the plays that are there. They don't need to create plays that aren't there. They won't need to make spectacular plays for the ages, but they need to take what the defense gives them. And when the opportunity is there, they need to do the right things. And from a perspective of quarterback throwing the ball, if he's going to miss a throw, he needs to make sure he misses in the right spot, not the wrong spot, because turnovers are going to be huge in a game that features two defenses that have been stopping the run well recently and two offenses that have been struggling to score some points.
Trevor, let's finish with this quickly. Where do you expect BYU to show up tomorrow in the latest, greatest college football playoff rankings?
Well, they were 6th in the ranking last week. They were 7th in the AP last week. AP dropped them back to 14. So I would expect BYU to drop all the way out of the top 12 in this next ranking. And if not, they'd be lingering just at the very back of the top 12. But either way, that stuff doesn't matter. Now, if BYU wins the conference championship, they're still in the playoff. If they pick up a second loss anywhere along the way, they're out of the playoff. And so where the ranking is right now is interesting for fans, but it doesn't change what their new reality is now that they've lost the game.
Trevor, always insightful. Great stuff. We appreciate the time on every Monday as part of BYU Sports Nation's BYU football coverage. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.